But Zion, we spoke about a bit before about, the maintenance of modern 21st century consumer lifestyles. I get the sense from listening to an awful lot of people who are Greens or have that green tinged politics that they actually see a broad-based, prosperous middle class as problematic and that they actually don't want people to have the freedom, the independence, the liberty that goes along with having cheap energy for a variety of reasons, whether they're aesthetic or political or what have you. Do you think that some of that is driving the opposition to nuclear power in places like Australia?
I think there is some of that. I mean, it's ironic, of course, because the green movement, the environmental movement, is a very middle class advantaged kind of movement. And then they're saying we don't want other people to have these lifestyles, or we messed up in having these lifestyles, even though we've experienced the benefits, and all of the things that come along with having a lot of energy. There is some of that. Some of it is just still very irrational fear. And I find that sometimes having the conversations will shift people's minds because they fear things like radiation and waste. These are old fears that are quite easy to displace now if you talk about fossil fuels and impacts of fossil fuels, because a lot of people understand that. So there's different reasons, but ultimately, I think even when you see politicians talking, you can see there's quite a lot of fear there. Like they're having almost like they're getting really upset and taking it personally. And I often say, we're just talking about data here. Like you can go and look at the reports, but don't make the mistakes of what we have done in Europe. Like we're realizing now, but now we got to get through the winter. Now we're talking about, can we get through the winter? I mean, if you look at what's happened in Germany, they phased out the nuclear power plants. They got worried in 2011 because of the Fukushima Daiichi power plant meltdown. Even though no one was killed by that meltdown, they were worried about it. Even though they're not going to have a tsunami or major earthquake in Germany, they're worried about it. They had an irrational fear response. They phased out all of their nuclear. So they got 3 power stations left. And what's really interesting is that recent polls show that the German public have massively shifted in favor now of nuclear and keeping those power stations open. But the government there is still saying, no, what we'll do is we'll restart the mothballed coal power stations, but we won't reopen nuclear. And it's totally bizarre because it's A, against what people want, and B, they are struggling. They're annoying their European neighbors because of this energy deficit. I mean, they are struggling to get to the winter. They're talking about not having enough firewood to get through the winter. That's how bad it is. So it's bad in the UK, but it's not as bad as that, at least not yet. But again, we haven't made good decisions on nuclear, and the ambitions that Germany had to reach 100% renewables by 2050 or whatever it was, they've dropped that now. They've lost their coal target. They were supposed to phase coal out in the next few years, and they're reopening coal-fired power stations. And in Britain, we're talking about restarting fracking. I'm not a fan of fracking, but I also don't want people to freeze in their homes. And frankly, we're importing it anyway. We're importing the gas anyway. We need something until we get nuclear built here. Don't do what Germany has done. So I've seen that there are ambitions in South Australia to have 500% renewables by 2050. Look, I'm all for ambition. If you're talking about raising child literacy rates or getting people to the moon, I think it's great. I think nations do incredible things when they're ambitious, but you've got to be realistic too. Like you've got to look at the numbers and say, does it add up or doesn't it? It didn't work in Germany, and now they're in dire straits. And at some point, I think that politicians are going to have to recognize that and make different decisions. It won't work anywhere else. No large grid in the entire world has ever been decarbonized only using renewables. Even when there's huge amounts of hydropower in places where there is a lot of hydropower available, like Sweden and Finland, even then they need nuclear to fill the energy needs that are left.
Zion Lights, always fantastic. A voice of reason and common sense. And I will remind our viewers that Zion was a leading member of Extinction Rebellion. Climate change is a passionate belief of hers, yet you hear from her common sense based on data. And that's why I urge people to bring young climate change concerned kids to listen to Zion Lights speak, because she is literally a light in the darkness on this issue.